Today we're gonna make an apple pie. I'm gonna begin with the mise en place, and that is taking my pan and spraying it. You could use melted butter or lard, fat with a brush. Spray is convenient, and set it aside. And I'm also gonna do the dough now, so I can let it rest and then do the filling. As I get started the filling, I will preheat the oven. You don't need more than 30 minutes to really preheat the oven. We're gonna start measuring our ingredient. I think I've shown you that, but for those who have not seen the previous video, I'm gonna show you again the process. You need a container to hold your product. This is a scale. Here it's set up on gram when you press the on, and it's taking consideration the weight of the container. You just have to press a little bit here, and now you get pound and ounces if that's what you're measuring. Here we want 10.5 ounces of all-purpose flour. It's important to use the right type of flour because each flour has a different amount of protein in it, and that affects your dough. 10.5 ounces. And voila. Now notice that these teaspoons are like this design. I like this deeper type of teaspoon than the typical one that's a little wider face and shallower. And the reason that I like it, I believe it's more conducive to measuring, more accurate. When you measure with a spoon, you want a flush spoon, and so depending on what you measure, you may need a knife or something straight, a straight edge. And then take your salt. We're gonna go with a half a teaspoon. You see it here, half a teaspoon. And then I make sure that it is really flush. So fill it up completely, and then you go with a straight blade and go across. That's measuring accurately a teaspoon, tablespoon, or whatnot. I'm gonna add it here because I want to pre-mix it in the dry ingredients, and I know we need a little bit of sugar in there. Bingo. So that is 1 teaspoon of sugar, half a teaspoon of salt. I recommend if you get serious in baking to get one of those scales. They really are fairly inexpensive. I add the sugar to the flour, to the dry ingredient, flour, sugar, salt. 6 ounces of butter. A stick is 4 ounces. I always work in baking a pastry with unsalted butter, and I can always add salt to the butter if I want to make it salty. However, I cannot take it away. For certain desserts, for certain things, we don't want that salt at all. We're gonna need a stick and a half for that. For 6 ounces. The butter should be cold, not frozen. We're gonna strain all the dry ingredients together, salt, sugar, and flour. This makes sure that you do not have any lumps in the flour, and also it helps dissipate and spread evenly the salt and the sugar in the dough. So we're gonna make it by hand, since it's a small amount of pie dough, and it's doable in a machine, but there's no reason to use a machine for such a small amount. Now I'm gonna cube that butter. It's still a little frozen, but that's okay for this purpose. Be careful when you cut something semi-frozen, so the blade does not slip and goes somewhere you don't want it to. Breaking it down will help warm it up a little bit. You do not want soft butter. We're trying to do somewhat of a flaky dough. Of butter. Now I'm going to prepare the egg wash. Just use an egg. I know it's called egg wash, but I never add water nor milk to my egg wash. An egg has a lot of water in it to begin with. So I just crack the egg, drain, and then put a pinch of salt in it, like so. And then I'll beat it with a fork. No more liquid added because I do not want it to sink into the dough. It's a decorative approach. It makes the baked product coated with egg wash shiny and give it a nice brown color with a little shine. And I'm going to put it in the refrigerator until we're ready to use it. So there you are with all the mise en place. We got the dry ingredients, the flour, sugar, salt, pre-mixed, sifted and pre-mixed, and we got the cubed cold butter, and we got the 2 ounces or quarter of a cup of cold water as well. If your tap water is not cold enough, just a little bit of ice in the water may do the trick. Just make sure that you don't have the ice cubes left in there. What you can do is you measure it after you cool it with those block of ice, not letting the ice cubes get into the dough. The first thing we're gonna do is take the butter and break it into smaller pieces and mix it into the flour. So it's still a little cold, so I'm gonna mix it in the flour, toss it. And as that's done, I will take every piece of butter and break it down into smaller pieces with the flour. Now I've seen some people using some tools with some wires and stuff to do that job. You don't need to get another tool. You just have, your mama made you 2 tools right here. Here they are, 2 hands. But if you want to use a gadget, the idea is to get those little flakes of butter still in there, in the dough. Your dough should not be smooth. It should be flaky. That's what's going to give the flakiness to your dough. So we keep going, go get back in there. You don't want to leave those cubes of butter as they are. That was just to break it down for you to make it easier. As the butter warms up a little bit, it becomes also easier to do that. So you kind of keep digging. And because everything is coated with the flour, it doesn't stick to your fingers. You don't want to leave big chunky pieces of butter in there. If you break it down further, you're gonna get what's called a mealy kind of dough. So it's different schools, mealy, flaky, depending on what you're looking for. Notice that I use butter, by the way. I did not mention anything about that earlier, as opposed to lard, fat, shortening. So using butter may not be the traditional American pie, if you will, but a French heritage tells me I should use butter. They say everything is better with butter. That sounds like a commercial. It's getting there. So it's well worth spending a little extra time doing that. So remember what you got here. You got the flour, you got the salt, you got the sugar. So then the next is the butter, and doing that with just the dry ingredients so you don't get your dough tough but flaky. We're almost there. The last ingredient will be the water, because once you add the water, you just want it to hold the dough. Do not overmix at that point. So that's why all your butter should be the size you want it in there. It's okay to show little specks of butter within the dough. You don't try to get it smooth. Oh yeah, that's it. I always do the dough before I do the filling because I like my dough to rest a little bit. And once I get the filling, I don't want to let the filling sit and turn brown. Okay, so it looks like we're good on the butter. It's definitely warming up a little bit and it's all flaky. I'm not catching any more cubes. The cubes have turned into flakes, coated with flour. And now we're gonna incorporate the water carefully with one hand, the water. It doesn't look like a lot of water, but let's see if I need to add a little extra. Sometimes it happens. It's definitely gonna add a little bit of extra water. If you see that it's too dry and it doesn't form into a dough, then don't overdo it, don't overmix it, otherwise the fat is gonna make the dough and it's not gonna hold well. By the same token, don't drown it, don't add too much water. Notice how I toss. I'm not kneading the dough, I'm just bringing it together, letting the flour absorb the liquid, the water. We're almost there. Start getting stickier. A little water goes a long way. So when you make a little adjustment, be careful. Now you see it's forming now. So there is enough moisture. Keep it in the bowl. So you see there's really no need for a machine for this type of dough. And a machine may risk to get it overmixed if you're not careful. So now I got my dough. I'm just gonna shape it a little bit without overworking it. Flatten it a little bit. You can see the little traces of butter. That is good. So it's holding as a dough, a little flour, and I'm gonna dust a little flour in the bottom of the bowl. And I'm gonna put a little piece of plastic on top and then refrigerate it. Let it rest as I work on the filling. I'm gonna demo the Chef Jacques way to peel, core apples. You need a chef knife. Économe called in French. Économe, that's a peeler, potato peeler or apple peeler. And the beauty of this that it just peels a certain thickness and it controls it. It doesn't waste more than it has to. And it's very quick and efficient. This a melon bowler or Parisian scooper, and I have my bowl here for the filling, and the apples are here. So what I do, the first step is after I washed and dried the apples, I use the one end of the melon bowler and remove the core this way and set them aside. So I go do this to the others as well. It's more efficient in series. And then I turn it this way and keep turning. All these, by the way, if you had rabbits, you raise rabbits, they would love this. But otherwise, that can go into your compost bin. You got this here, get that here. And the next thing, we're gonna cut this in half with a chef knife and remove the core. So this is very particular. I use the larger head of the scooper. There is a smaller one, larger head, to make sure I get all of that. That envelope that hold the seeds is very tough and doesn't break down in the cooking process of the pie, and it's really not pleasant when you bite into a piece of pie. So now, but you notice how it's nice and clean and neat, and it's going to be very consistent, so you don't have a knife that slips and you change the shape of the apple. Very minimum amount of waste, very consistent, very, very important. So that will go compost. Okay, so the beauty of having this here that even, besides the fact that you're not wasting the product, is that you could shape it in different ways. If you do a tart for the filling, but you could do something really paper thin to do a galette. And I know I'm straying away from the pie project. Or to do a garnish on top of a tart or something, very nice and thin, so it cooks nice and even. You can do this, and because of the way you peel it, you can do a crown, and you can see that you can really do some nice precise work. Very nice, and that would cook very easily. So now this is not what we're gonna do, but we will use it for filling. Nothing goes to waste. For your pie, so as not to get confused, the only thing you're gonna have to do after you peel your apple, you got it peeled, cored on both ends, cut it in half. And one thing I did not mention is the water, okay? I do not do lemon water for when I do apples. That's why I did my dough first. And it will not brown much at all. And since it's going to go in the oven, it doesn't make any difference. The vitamins are water soluble. So when you let your apple sit in water, they will lose flavor and nutrients. So we're gonna do it fast enough, put them in sugar, cinnamon, and finish the pie, and then it goes in the oven. And we skip that, save you time, it's more nutritious, and save a lemon juice, whatever you would be using. I prefer using Granny Smith because they are a little acidic. They work very well for baking wedges. I pre-measured my sugar, cinnamon, a little bit of flour to absorb some of the moisture and bind the filling a little bit. That was 4 apples. They were pretty large. So that should be plenty for our 9-inch pie tin. Now I got my sugar, my flour. I kept them separate so you can see my flour, my cinnamon. I don't want to overdo it in the cinnamon. A lot of apple product have way too much cinnamon in it. I want to taste the apple actually, not just the cinnamon. So you can premix it a little bit together into the flour. That will ensure that you don't make lumps. Sometimes the flour may make lumps once it gets some moisture, but by being broken down with the sugar, that will prevent that. The flour and the cinnamon, same thing. You don't want a clump of cinnamon somewhere. You take a bite in that, that's not so good. So pre-mixed, and then now we're gonna add this to it, mix it in. The apple will render some juice when they bake, even as they sit a little bit as we get the dough ready. They're gonna start releasing a little bit of juice because of the sugar. And as you can see, while you coat it like this, your apples will not have a chance, no time to really try to turn brown. If they do turn a little bit brown, by the time in the baking process, this will go away. No lemon water at all. That's gonna be all yummy for the tummy, as I say. You see it's getting wet. Sugar, cinnamon is helping the apple release its own juice. I'm gonna set aside as I demonstrate the assembly of the pie. Now we're about to put the pie together and take about a little less than half the dough. The bottom will take a little less than the top. Okay, the top will do a dome, so it has chilled nicely. Dust the flour, you can see a little piece of butter in there. I'm going to use the little rolling pin. Of course, this is the little rolling pin, house-like rolling pin, but I have my own personal pastry chef rolling pin, much longer. But for just one pie, it's really not that necessary. So, going back to rolling this in a circle. Don't allow it to stick to the table, to the marble, granite. Dust as needed. Go, roll it nice and even. From time to time, it wants to stick a little bit because you remember you have a few little pieces of butter there. Little trick, roll it on the rolling pin. Then let it fall gently. Align it, adjust it. The oven is telling me that it's preheated to 375. Be careful not to stretch the dough. If you stretch the dough, it will stretch back in a cooking process. So we got it pretty close here without creating too much waste. So I'm shaping it, not stretching it here at the edge. You want to make sure that the dough is covering all the edge because that's where we're going to seal the top, right? So now I will take a fork and duck the bottom to make sure there will not be big bubbles forming. Now we're gonna add our filling. You see the juice already rendering by the sugar, rendering the natural juice of the apples. Just arrange the segment a little bit. It's a lot of filling. Now remember, yeah, it's gonna make a dome, but as it bake, that apple is gonna shrink in volume, render more liquid. Some steam is gonna escape, so you really wanna bulk it up. Don't be afraid to make it. It looks like there's too much apple until you bake it and it's just the right amount. Be careful not to have anything on the edges. Watch those big wedges so that they are properly evened out. Look at that juice. We're not gonna waste that juice. Just gonna go in there. That's sugar, cinnamon, flavor. Make sure nothing is in the way of the edges, and the fruit is well balanced all around. No big pockets. We're gonna do the lid now that we have this. We're repeating the action. Dust flour. Shape it to a circle without kneading the dough, without working it. Don't work it. Just a little bit flour. Roll it as a circle. See, by turning it like this, that's how you control the shape of your dough. Be gentle, consistent. Don't press too hard. Let the rolling pin do its thing. Keep controlling the shape. Otherwise, if you end up with a whole lopsided shape, then you will use more dough than you need, and you may run short actually. Don't run it too thin, not too thick. So it's got to be big, a little bit bigger than your circle, than your pie. Maybe around 10 inches, because it's making a dome, right? So you want to make sure that you have just the right amount. Okay, I think we're good. Now, that's when I'm gonna roll it here. Let me dust a little flour so it don't stick, because I want to show you what I'm gonna do with the egg wash. Set it aside here, egg wash on the edges. And that's not for beauty, that's gonna be for glue. It's gonna be sealing that dough, the bottom with the top. Take it and unwind it. There we go. Adjust it. Try not to stretch. Just move it around a little bit. Gentle. So remember, we have our oven preheated before we finish this. 375. Now we're gonna use a fork and we're gonna do the edge, and that makes it a little decorative, and at the same time it seals the top and the bottom well. Don't press too hard, especially on those aluminum, like one-time use kind of tin. They're not all that strong. So you go like this, and then you can use the back of your chef knife, and you just do that, down, with the back of the chef knife to trim it, following in a downward motion, following and turning the pie. And now we got this. Very little scraps that could be used, added to another fresh dough to make another pie later, if you make another batch of dough. Now we're gonna egg wash the top. Now that's more for looks, to get a nice golden brown. Remember, no water, no milk in the egg wash, just the egg, a pinch of salt. Egg wash it nice and even, so it will look even. If you have extra egg wash, you can freeze it in a small container with the lid, label it, and then freeze it and pull it out as you need it anytime you do some baking. Waste not, want not. Okay, now we're gonna do just a little decoration like this. And then we're gonna poke some holes around to let some of the steam escape. The steam will escape, want it enough. And if you do not show it where to escape, it may crack your pie unevenly. Now, because of some of the wedges, you may have a few little surprises there. Some apple pie filling are kind of soft and easier to handle than going from scratch with raw apples. So I make a little hole there to let the steam escape as well. So now I'm gonna go put it on a half a sheet pan. I always do this in case then there is a little bit of juice escaping in a baking process. You don't mess up your oven. It's easier to wash a pan than try to clean up the oven. And now I'm gonna take it to the oven. Open the oven, nice and 375 degrees, and place it in there. All right, I'm probably gonna set the 375. I'm gonna set the kitchen timer 30 minutes. So, but you always want to put your timer for less time than you estimate, so that you can readjust as you get closer. So let's see, after 30 minutes, we can tell that it's looking good, but it's getting some color, but it's not there yet. So I added another 20 minutes and that should do it. I'm gonna turn it around so it bakes more evenly, but again, you can see that it has way to go. And not only you got to look at the top, but you also have, I think probably 15 minutes should do it. So I have it on 20. It's been over an hour. Look at this. It's a beauty. So when you check your pie, so now it's been leaking a little bit here, but nothing too bad. That happens. You gotta check the edges and the sides, and you gotta make sure that your pie is cooked, baked the bottom of the pie. Now, of course, it's hard to see the bottom of the pie because it's kind of hot and you can't flip it. So the only thing I'm gonna do, I see it there, and I'm gonna give it another 5 good minutes, just for extra precaution to make sure that the bottom is cooked fully and not soggy. So now let it rest on the cooling rack, so it cools better and faster, more evenly, as opposed to just sitting on a bench. And we're gonna let it cool before we can serve it. Here it is, the final product, the apple pie, served here in this case with a scoop of ice cream, vanilla ice cream a la mode. Or it could be served with just vanilla sauce, creme anglaise, the whole pie, minus one slice obviously, that is on the plate. Et voilà. Enjoy. Bon appétit.